Okay, and now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. This year we're honored to have with us Bubba Cunningham, the Director of Athletics at UNC. He's currently in his 11th year as Director of Athletics for a D1 school. Before coming to Chapel Hill in 2011, he served as Director of Athletics for the University of Tulsa. And before that, he was Director of Athletics at Ball State University. He was honored as the 2008-2009 FBS Central Region Athletics Director of the Year, an award presented by the National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics. Mr. Cunningham guided Tulsa through its initial move to Conference USA and spearheaded a $60 million athletics campaign, which included a $20 million renovation to the football stadium, a $20 million endowment for athletic scholarships, and a $20 million endowment for coach salaries, a very impressive accomplishment. Bubba earned his bachelor's degree and master's degree in business administration from Notre Dame, where he played for the men's golf team. He serves on the NCAA Division I Men's Golf Committee. He's a member of the NACDA's Executive Committee and was previously on the boards of directors of several foundations, the Alzheimer's Association of Oklahoma, the Folds of Honor Foundation, and the Gatorade National Advisory. We are proud to welcome Mr. Cunningham to this year's foundation dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, Bubba Cunningham.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. And my apologies to you, because I understand that last year you had a Harvard MBA, and this year you got Bubba. A bad drop, so I apologize. I tell you what, working at the University of North Carolina is awesome. Working in college athletics and working at any university is fantastic. A lot of the reasons because of the students that are among us today. It is incredibly inspirational to come to work every day, to see the enthusiasm, the energy that it brings to the campus. The thing that bothers me about working at a university is I continue to get older and they stay 18 to 22, and the gap is getting really bad. But it is a wonderful place to work, and I've been fortunate to work at a university for probably about 30 years now. I actually haven't even added it up, but I majored in accounting. I went down to Atlanta and worked in public accounting, and that didn't go so well. 4 months later, I was back at Notre Dame, and I was working in the Alumni Association and just had a fabulous opportunity. And then I went from alumni to athletics, and it has been a wonderful transition. And unfortunately, I don't get to stay for dinner tonight because we are welcoming back all of our students, all of our student athletes tonight, and we have to go through all the compliance rules with them. And if you hear anything back behind us, it's our football team getting ready for next week's game against South Carolina. Larry does something I've never seen a coach do before. The week before a game, we rent the buses, we put the kids on the bus, we drive them to campus, they get off the bus, they walk to the locker room, they put on their uniforms, they go through the exact replica of the game day experience, so when they have it for the very first time as freshmen, they understand what it's going to be like. And then he also reminds me that the sophomores and juniors have probably forgotten in the last 6 months, so they want a refresher course with them. So they're out there doing that right now, but I really appreciate this opportunity to be with you tonight. What I thought I would do is actually talk about a little bit about my career and how I landed here and some of the people that I have met along the way. Because as I have mentioned, it has been a wonderful place to work in intercollegiate athletics and at a university. When I mentioned, and I first went back to Notre Dame, I left accounting and I went to work in the Alumni Association. And they said it would be a minimum of 50% travel. Well, I was born in Michigan and I grew up in Florida. I was born in Flint, Michigan, and grew up in Naples, Florida. Now that is moving from night to day, total opposite ends, and I absolutely love the warm weather. And so I didn't like accounting, so I ended up moving back to South Bend, and they said it'd be minimum of 50% travel. I said, if it's any less, I'll quit. And so that first year, I traveled 275 days all over the country, visiting alumni clubs throughout the country. It was a wonderful experience at 23 years old. But what made it great was my boss. I worked for a guy named Chuck Lennon. Chuck was the most positive, enthusiastic person I've ever been around. You'd come into the office, I'd be sitting at my desk, he would come in the morning, he'd walk around my desk to me and shake my hand and say, let's have a great day today. his enthusiasm was absolutely infectious and contagious. And one thing he used to say a lot is when you're hard at work doing your job, he said, alumni don't interrupt our business, alumni are our business. And it was a great lesson to learn early, that's why we were here. We're here for alumni. And so I've carried that over to what I do every day. Students don't interrupt our business, students are our business. So how do we deliver outstanding service to our students here on the campus? I work with 800 student athletes in 28 different sports, but we're trying to deliver outstanding service to those students. And I learned that through Chuck and his wonderful enthusiasm that he has. By the way, he's 71 years old. He retired last year. And a 71-year-old guy that retired from the Alumni Association, working there for over 35 years, he took a full-time job as an assistant baseball coach at Ave Maria University down outside of Fort Myers. He still has enthusiasm that I cannot imagine that anyone could match. He was a terrific mentor, and I'm indebted to him forever. Another person I worked with at Notre Dame, I worked with him for 11 years as Coach Lou Holtz. Lou was remarkable. He was a funny guy, completely engaging, passionate, but he did things his way. And when he got there, he was absolutely remarkable in a lot of ways because of the way he could motivate people. But from his opening press conference, I said, I'm really going to like this guy. He said, I'm really delighted to be here. He was at Minnesota. He'd been all over the place, but then ended up at Minnesota. And so he moved from Minnesota to South Bend, and he hates cold weather more than I do. And he said, I'm so delighted to be here. I thought it was a little bit further south, however. He said, I'm tired of Minnesota. Up there, everybody has blonde hair and blue ears. And he said, it just doesn't work out. He talked about getting started in setting goals. His first job in coaching was at South Carolina. So he had moved down to South Carolina to work for a head coach. He wasn't there 2 months, and the head coach left to go to the Canadian Football League. So he had moved his family down to Columbia, South Carolina, and the head coach left, and he was unemployed. His wife they already had 2 children. His wife was expecting the third, and he had no idea what to do. And in his mind, he was at the lowest of lows in his life and what he should be doing. So his wife got him a goals book. And Lou, you should talk about setting some goals, and maybe you could make something of your life. And so he said the more he read the book, the more enthusiastic he became. And he started writing down all these goals. He said he wanted to have dinner at the White House. He wanted to take off from an aircraft carrier. He wanted to be on the Tonight Show. He had all kinds of different goals. And the more he wrote, the more excited he got. And he finally went back to Beth and he said, hey, Beth, I have 107 goals that I want to achieve in my life. And she said, well, that's nice. She said, why don't you make it 108? Get a job. So he was a great mentor, but it was all about goal setting. And by the way, when he did go to South Carolina, I do stay in touch with him quite regularly. I actually called him last week. But when he first went to South Carolina, because I didn't think he would coach again when he left, he went down there and he said, I said, Coach, how's your team going to be? He said, he said, a third of my kids are great. A third of my kids are really good, and the other third's going to play. And so I said, well, we may have some trouble. He was terrific to me, and I had a great, great experience with him. But in 11 years, he went through 33 different assistant coaches. Really, really hard on his staff. Some of those guys got better jobs, some of them left. But what struck me was there's a lot of different ways to do your job and to be very good and very effective at what you do. He moved around a lot. As you well know, he was the head coach at North Carolina. He was head coach at Connecticut, North Carolina State, Arkansas, Minnesota, Notre Dame, and South Carolina. And he did it his way, and he was very gifted at how he did it. He went to a bowl game in the second year of every program that he took over, and he never took over a winning program. And the best year of his career was always in his third year, and that's the year he won a national championship at Notre Dame. So it was really interesting to me to watch his career, watch how he was successful, and what he did to be effective with the student athletes that he was working with every day. So I was there for 20 years. I left there in 2002 and went to Ball State. Had a great experience at Ball State. And when I think about the people that I met there, I think about the football coach who was the coach when I got there. It was a guy named Bill Lynch, a wonderful individual. And when I think about him, all I think about is integrity. Bill was there, had been there about 8 or 9 years before I got there. I came in, our team had been pretty average for a long time. He was a decent coach, but there was a sense that we really needed to make a change. It's probably the hardest thing that I ever did. I got there in August, and by Thanksgiving, I'd made the decision I was going to make a coaching change. So I called Bill in, and I let him go. And that's hard when you've only been there. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever done. I'd been an AD for about 3 months, and I had to let a coach go. So what did Bill do? I fired him on Thanksgiving. In December, he had a pledge payment due on the football stadium that we were trying to renovate, and he made his pledge payment for the stadium. Then that spring, he enrolled his son in the quarterback's camp of the coach that replaced him at Ball State University, and then wrote a check to have that coach coach his son in that camp. I've never seen a coach or any staff member that has been let go with that kind of personal integrity to do the things that he did. Ironically, about 6 months later, I had an open position, and he applied for it, and I hired him back in a completely different position. Well, he did that. He enjoyed it. He did a terrific job, but as things would work out, and actually an AD job came open in DePaul, Indiana. He took it, became the AD there, and then ended up becoming a head coach again. He actually became the head coach at Indiana University, and then he was let go from there and is still in college athletics today. But the personal integrity that he maintained throughout that process is just remarkable to me. And so when I think about people that I want to work with, it's guys like Bill Lynch that have that level of integrity. Ironically, I replaced him with a guy named Brady Hoke. Brady is a passionate, aggressive football coach. He's currently the head coach at Michigan. So Brady was the defensive line coach at Michigan. He had played at Ball State, and I was interested in hiring somebody that had a lot of passion and a lot of ambition, and I really felt that Brady was the guy. And so we hired, well, actually, I take that back. Brady was my second or third choice. And sometimes it just works out that way. There was a guy who was a special teams coach of the Philadelphia Eagles who I tried like crazy to hire, and I could have absolutely ruined his career, but he wouldn't let me. There was a guy named John Harbaugh. So John, I was trying, he wouldn't do it, so Brady was my second choice, and he ended up being very good. He won 12 games and then went on to San Diego State, and now he's at Michigan. But his passion was something that has really stuck with me, and his commitment to the student athlete that I think is really important. I think that's why he was so successful his first year at Michigan and got to a BCS game as well. Then I was there for 3 years, so I moved on to Tulsa after that. And it was incredible at Tulsa. Tulsa is in the middle of nowhere. And if I was talking to a friend and I said, hey, will you come visit me? He lives in Baltimore and he works for Under Armour and he's flying all over the country. He said, the only way I'm going to visit you is if they hit the eject button and I land there. I wasn't too pleased with that. But I have to admit, if there were like 15 states that I might live in, Oklahoma wasn't one of them. But we had a fabulous time. Really enjoyed Tulsa. But when I got there was a guy named Steve Cragthorpe. He was the head coach. And Steve had followed a guy who had been the head coach there for 10 years. His last 2 seasons, he was 1-10 and 1-10. Tulsa was thinking about dropping the football program. And the coach who had preceded Steve didn't think you could win at Tulsa because they dropped the hyper program, their PE program. They changed some majors that were pretty easy for student athletes. And there was just no way you could win because he didn't have the resources he needed to win. What happened was they talked to Steve and said, Steve, here's the curriculum that we have. Here are the assets that we have. Here are the resources that we have. Do you think you can win? Steve said, absolutely. He came in there and took us to bowl games in his second year. He went to multiple bowl games and became the head coach at Louisville and is now the current offensive coordinator at LSU. And it struck me, it's really, when you talk to people or you talk to coaches, if they continue to talk about what they don't have, they're doomed for failure. If they talk about what they can do or what their vision is, they're destined for success. And Steve was remarkable in that way. He took a dormant program and turned it around. Then we got a guy after he left, a guy named Todd Graham, who's the most aggressive guy I've ever been around. Todd has a lot of quirks to him. He was the head coach he was actually the defensive coordinator at Tulsa. He became the head coach at Rice. He was only there 1 year. We hired him back at Tulsa, became the head coach. He was with us for 4, left us to go to Pittsburgh. He was the head coach at Pitt for 1 year, left Pitt and went to Arizona State. He's the head coach at Arizona State right now. But what he had a great ability to do was identify talent. So he moves around a lot, so I wouldn't be planting any roots in Arizona State because he may not be there long. But he did hire great assistant coaches. He hired Gus Malzahn, who's the current head coach at Auburn, and he hired Chad Morris, the offensive coordinator at Clemson, and he did an awful lot of good things for Tulsa as well. And then when he left, we hired a guy named Bill Blankenship, who is probably the most virtuous man I've ever been around. He was a longtime high school coach, and I really didn't want to hire him either. He was about my second or third choice. So actually, if I pick you first, it's really a problem. But if you get second or third, it's really pretty good. So Bill, in his first year, he won the conference championship, beat Iowa State in the Memphis Bowl. Beat Iowa State in the Memphis Bowl. Has done a terrific job. But the reason I'm talking about these different coaches and the different philosophies that they have is really because, to me, it comes down to alignment. And when I got to Tulsa, there was a chairman of the board there who I thought was absolutely fabulous. It was a guy named Fulton Collins. Fulton Collins was a 3-time Stanford graduate. And he had quite a bit of money. He had made a lot of money in different industries and had settled back to Tulsa where he wanted to live. And he was making a difference. Stanford was after him to give an awful lot of money, and he didn't do it because his philosophy was, I can make a significant difference at the University of Tulsa. And he did. He led our board. Our board was completely aligned with our president. I was aligned with the president. And in just the 6 years I was there, he completed, as chairman of the board, a fitness center for our students, an administration building for our admissions office, financial aid office, a stadium reconstruction project, new dormitories for the students, a dining hall renovation for the students. We took over and began to manage the museum in Tulsa, and he completely reorganized our academic program and curriculum. He did a remarkable job because they had a vision of what they wanted to do, and he was the guy that was driving the philanthropy in the city and the agenda on the campus. And so when I look around this room and see the philanthropy in this room and the scholarships afforded to these students, it is truly remarkable, and I commend all of you for what you have done and what you continue to do. Many of you have been so generous with your money to the pharmacy school, to the Rams Club, to other portions of this university. We thank you for that. And I know that the students share in my appreciation for all that you have done. But when I came to North Carolina, then I said, okay, now witness protection is over. I have to go back to the East Coast where it's a bigger operation, and it has been absolutely fabulous. You get here, and what we know from the rest of the country when you come here, it was all about Dean Smith. And I'm just so delighted that he was honored with the Medal of Freedom just recently by President Obama, and it'll be delightful. That celebration is going to be November the 20th this year in Washington. But what he did for civil rights with Charlie Scott here, what he did on the basketball court, maintaining winning no matter how he played, whether it was a fast break style or the four corners, it didn't matter. He was very innovative and very creative. And then I go down the hall and I see a guy like Anson Dorrance with 22 national championships in 30 years. And what I've learned with Anson, I spent a lot of time with him in the last month. We went out to California when our women's team was honored with the Capital One Cup as the #1 women's sports programs in the country. And I got to spend about 3 days with Anson, and he was absolutely terrific. It struck me that he is a lifelong learner. He never sits still. I said, well, Anson, what do you do for vacation? He says, I hate vacation. They expect you to go and sit there and do nothing. I can't do that. He has been changing his philosophy, changing his training. Everything he does is to continue to put himself ahead of his competition, which I find absolutely remarkable and refreshing. Roy Williams is another example of a coach that I just can't spend enough time with. He has been terrific. And my story with Roy is when he first got here, the Rams Club was looking at renovating the Smith Center. And we were talking about video boards. And I guess we didn't have much of a board. And no one really wanted to do it because we have a lot of tradition. We do things the same way here, a lot. And so Roy came into the meeting and he said, we can't let tradition make our decisions. And he said, I'm sorry, I've got to go to practice. As soon as he walked out of the room, the Rams Club said, okay, well, we need a video board. And so a year later, we ended up getting a video board in there. And he has done a remarkable job trying to maintain that balance. And when I think about the School of Pharmacy, you have done the same thing. You have come in and you've tried to change the School of Pharmacy, and you have effectively changed it. You haven't let your tradition hold you back. And then Coach Hatchell, she's another one, going into the Hall of Fame in just a couple of weeks, 900 wins. She has been remarkable in what she has been able to accomplish. But again, it's trying to balance what is the right balance in your tradition versus your change. And I know we've all read the same books. We've all read Good to Great. We've all read Built to Last. And when you go through those books, you talk about preserving the core and stimulating change. The enemy of great is good. The tyranny of the or, the genius of the and. All of that is part of what this business culture that we're in today and university culture that we're in today. But I had a great opportunity today to spend time with Dean Bluen. And I learned an awful lot about your strategic plan and what the school has stood for and what that strategic plan has meant. Moving from 17th in funding to second, moving from the mid-teens to second in U.S. News and World Report is remarkable. But it doesn't, you can have a vision. And I remember Joe DeSimone, one of our faculty members, talking about vision. You know, vision without funding is simply a dream or a hallucination. You have been able to fund your vision, and you have been remarkable in what you've done. And so now when I look at your future strategic plan about educational renaissance, the practice of pharmacy, research in the training enterprise, global engagement, institutional environment and business operations, your people, strategic planning, assessment, and quality improvement, I know that you're on a continued upward path, like we hope all of our teams are. And I hope that we can continue to make this university proud in how we represent the institution. So in closing, there's one last coach that I'd like to mention a couple of things about, and that's Coach Wooden, Coach John Wooden. You know, I've never worked with him, but I've read every book he's ever had. While I was driving that alumni van around the country for those 275 days, one job I had on a particular Monday, I drove from South Bend, Indiana to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for the LSU game. And that game was on Saturday. The game was over, I got in the van and I drove to Southern California so we could play USC the following Saturday, and then I drove home. So I had a lot of time to listen to books on tapes and figure out what in the heck was going on in the world. But John Wooden is truly remarkable. And when I think of the success of the School of Pharmacy, I really think about John Wooden and some of the wisdom that he has in his pyramid of success. And the first thing he talked about are the fundamentals. And when I read your strategic plan, it was the fundamentals of teaching, research, and practice. And when John Wooden, every single year that he was the head coach at UCLA, he would call the entire team in, and he would teach them how to put their socks on. He would take his shoes off and take his sock and put it on, painstakingly slow, the players would say. And he would talk about not wanting to have a crease in his sock, because if he had a crease in his sock, he might get a blister. And if he had a blister, he wouldn't be able to play, and that would be detrimental to the team. And then he would show them how he would lace up the shoes. And they said he spent 30 minutes telling them how to lace up their shoes. And then when he'd stop, he'd pause, and he'd say, okay, now we'll do the left shoe. I cannot imagine Bill Walton back then wanting to listen to that. But it's absolutely true that the fundamentals are what's important, and you have zeroed in on the fundamentals. The other story about John Wooden I really, really like is the one about Jamal Wilkes, because John Wooden has a terrific quote, and he says, the key ingredient to stardom is the team. Jamal Wilkes was the most highly recruited athlete coming out of high school, a terrific player, and he got recruited by UCLA and he wasn't playing. And he went to Wooden and he said, you know, Coach, he said, you know I am the best player on this team. And Wooden looked at him, he said, I know, you are absolutely the best player on this team, but our team isn't best when you're playing. And until you figure that out, you're not going to play. So it really is about the team. And I think we have great coaches that worry about the team success ahead of the individual success. And we all have greater success when we kind of subjugate our responsibilities to the success of the team. And I know that our coaches are working in that effort. So the things that I've learned from these various coaches, and I've probably spoken too long, but the things that I've really learned that have really stuck with me over all this time is that enthusiasm, character, passion, goal setting, planning, innovation, evaluation, creativity, humility, all of those skills are transferable. And many of those skills you have transferred to the School of Pharmacy and you've executed at the School of Pharmacy. But it doesn't just happen by having a plan. It happens by funding a plan. And we appreciate all you have done to fund that plan. And I know, as I have read through your plan, that through your shared vision and aspirational thoughts, you will continue to be the preeminent School of Pharmacy, transforming human health throughout innovation in education, through innovation in education, practice, and research. I really appreciate the opportunity to be at this university and to be with you tonight. Thanks so much and have a great evening.